All right.
Yes, bro. Thank you, bro.
Thank you. Fine. Okay, so we are very fortunate to be in this Hare Krishna movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada, where everything has been given to us, and we can just follow the process which has been handed down by Srila Prabhupada, by the Acharyas, as it once again reminds me of the example of Radha Gopinath Prabhu. He was once giving this example that how, just like there is a jackfruit, so we all know how to remove the actual pulp within the fruit is so difficult. And so to cut the jackfruit itself, I have a knife, put oil, and so many things we have to do to cut it and remove. So it's such a tedious process. But he was explaining that how Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, they've done all those things. So we all know how much great struggle, how much austerity Srila Prabhupada underwent to establish this movement. So all that has been done by the previous Acharyas, by Srila Prabhupada, and now it is just like somebody has taken that jackfruit pulp, removed the seed also from inside, just put on a plate, put some honey, and they're offering to us on the plate. That is our situation now. Everything is like ready-made. Everything is available, so easily available. So in spite of all the facilities that are available to us, if we don't take Krishna consciousness seriously, then it's something which is very, very unfortunate. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada is saying here, we have only to execute the order of the Lord and fully surrender unto him. We have only to execute. See, Prabhupada is using the word only again and again. So it's only because in comparison to what Prithu Maharaj had to do, Jnanis and Yogis do, what is our austerity? Nothing compared to that. Peanuts. What Prithu Maharaj is going through. We don't have to do anything like that. Srila Prabhupada never told us to do anything like that. So we have only to execute the order of the spiritual master, preach Krishna consciousness, follow in the path of the Vaishnavas. So that's all what we're supposed to do. And then all perfection can be achieved. So we just have to sincerely follow the simple instructions that Srila Prabhupada has given us. Text 8. By thus practicing severe austerities, Maharaj Prithu gradually became steadfast in spiritual practice and completely free of all desires for fruitive activities. He also practiced breathing exercises to control his mind and senses, and by such control, he became completely free from all desires for fruitive activity. So here Srila Prabhupada is talking about the purpose of pranayama is to stop the mind and senses from engaging in fruitive activities. So Srila Prabhupada is explaining that how so all these activities, Prithu Maharaj's activities took place in Satya Yuga. So in this age, this practice of yoga is misunderstood by fallen souls who are not capable of practicing anything. So what is recommended now? Kalo nasteva 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 gatiranyatha. So Prabhupada is writing an interesting point. He says, as far as pranayam is concerned, chanting of the holy name of the Lord and dancing in ecstasy are also considered pranayam. So that is the equivalent for pranayam in Bhakti Yoga. And further down, last paragraph, Prabhupada writes, here the word pranayam does not refer to any ulterior motive. The actual aim is to strengthen the mind and senses in order to engage them in devotional service. In the present age, this determination can be very easily acquired simply by chanting the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Text 9. Thus, the best amongst human beings, Maharaj Prithu, followed that path of spiritual advancement which was advised by Sanat Kumar. That is to say, he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So he's basically following the instructions which were given by Sanat Kumar. Okay, somebody can read the second paragraph of the purport, please.
Actually, one who is self-realized engages himself in the service of the Lord perpetually, both in this world and in the next. Indeed, for devotees, there is no difference between this life and the next. In this life, a neophyte devotee is trained to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in the next life, he approaches that Supreme Person in Vaikuntha and renders the same devotional service. Even for the neophyte devotee, devotional service is considered Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. Devotional service to the Lord is never considered a material activity. Since he is acting on the Brahma Bhuta platform, a devotee is already liberated. He therefore has no need to practice any other type of yoga in order to approach the Brahma Bhuta stage. If the devotee adheres strictly to the orders of the spiritual master, follows the rules and regulations, and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, it should be concluded that he is already at the Brahma Bhuta stage, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26. Mam chayo vicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samtite tan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman.
Right. So, so this is the difference between devotional service and the other paths. So, on the other paths, one has to practice the various sadhanas, follow the strict discipline. Then gradually, maybe after many births, one can come to the Brahmabhuta platform, the liberated platform. And then coming to the Brahmabhuta platform is also not perfection. So from the Brahmabhuta platform, one can, that's a liberated platform. The Jnanis and Yogis may be able to merge into the impersonal Brahmajyoti. But even that is not an eternal situation. From there also one can fall down because of Anadrita Yushmadangraya. So because of not having service of the lotus feet of the Lord. But as far as devotees are concerned on the devotional path, we don't have to do something separately to come to the Brahmabhuta platform. So as it is said, on the path of devotional service, the means and the end are the same. So that's what Prabhupada is saying. Even a neophyte devotee is trained to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this life. And in the next life, he approaches the Supreme Person of Vaikuntha and renders the same devotional service. So there's no difference between what a devotee is doing in this life and the next life. So as long as the devotee is perfectly following the principles of devotional service, he's already on the Brahmabhuta platform. Srila Prabhupada writes, who is in one purport? I think so, you may have read it. It comes in the 4th canto only. I think so, it is in the one of the chapters of the previous unit, maybe 17th or 18th chapter, one of the chapters. Srila Prabhupada writes the statement in one of the purports. Who is on the liberated platform? One who is strictly following the instructions of a liberated person is actually on the liberated platform. So therefore, if one is strictly following the instructions of the spiritual master, which are ultimately the instructions of the Supreme Lord, then one is automatically on the Brahmabhuta platform. And that is why Prabhupada is saying, even for the neophyte devotee, devotional service is considered Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. So even a neophyte devotee can be on the liberated platform to the degree he strictly follows the rules and regulations of the acharyas. So this is the whole importance of following. This is also explained by Rupa Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada also explains it in the Nectar of Devotion. That actually devotional service is on the liberated platform. Devotional service is performed under the internal potency of the Lord. It is performed under the Chit Shakti, the internal potency. But then somebody may question that how it is possible for us to perform this pure devotional service with materially contaminated mind and senses. So the answer is, that is explained by Srila Prabhupada, is when we are performing devotional service according to the instructions of the previous acharyas, then because the previous acharyas have taken shelter of the internal potency, to the degree we follow their instructions, then our devotional service is also on the liberated platform. So to the degree we strictly follow, or whatever we follow strictly, that particular activity of devotional service is on the liberated platform, even though one may be a neophyte devotee. Therefore, in the definition of pure devotional service, Rupa Goswami is using the word Anushilanam, and the prefix anu there refers to the following the previous acharyas and continuously. So to the degree one follows, then Mahatmanastamam Partha Devim Prakrit Mashrita. So the Mahatma, the acharyas, the spiritual masters, they have taken shelter of the internal potency. And when we strictly follow, then our devotional activities also come under the internal potency. Otherwise, if we don't follow, then our devotional activities actually become tainted, become contaminated with the material energy, and thus they will not be activities performed on the liberated platform. Then the progress will be checked. And therefore, on the path of devotional service, the great emphasis is on keeping our false ego aside and surrendering, following. That is the most important aspect of devotional service. So what we are reading here in these purports and the verses, so we are not supposed to, or we are not expected to follow all these severe austerities and tapasya which the jnanis and yogis do. We are not expected to follow that. But what is expected on the path of devotional service is surrender. And surrender means keeping aside our false ego and agreeing to follow the instructions of the previous acharyas of the spiritual master. So if we simply agree to do that, that's the simple aspect. Of course, it is the most difficult thing. The false ego is the most difficult to give up. But if we simply agree to do that, then we make great progress, because then our activities immediately, even though one may be a neophyte, but by simply following, one's activities are immediately on the liberated platform. So this is a very important point that Srila Prabhupada is making. Therefore, Prabhupada is writing, if the devotee adheres strictly to the orders of the spiritual master, follows the rules and regulations, chants Hare Krishna mantra, it should be concluded that he is already at the Brahma Bhuta stage, even though he may be a neophyte. But if he's strictly following, then he's immediately on the liberated platform. He may not be liberated, but he's on the liberated platform because he's following the liberated acharyas. Yes, Satya Prabhu, you have some comment or question?
Sometimes we do not understand the instruction of spiritual master. Maybe it's our inability to understand the instruction of spiritual master, and we are not able to practice that particular instruction. So how do we really come to the platform of practicing that instruction?
Okay, so if there is some doubts about how to practice a certain instruction, how to apply certain instruction, then one can always take guidance from other senior Vaishnavas.
Like there are sometimes general instructions, some devotee has been committed some wrong things, and we may have to accept those things, and we are in that position, there is ambiguity about that, and there is some hitch in our heart that no, this is not correct, or this is, I feel this is like this, though the clarification has been given, but still that one is not ready to follow that. And then how do we really come to that platform?
Yes, so definitely, as long as one has inhibitions, one is sticking on to one's own perceptions, then to that degree it becomes difficult to accept. But if we simply accept the fact that that the spiritual masters, the acharyas know better, so why should I have any doubts in their decisions or what they're doing? So therefore the whole point, or the whole emphasis on the path of devotional service is on Shraddha, faith. So to the degree one has faith, then to that degree one can simply accept what the senior acharyas and Vaishnavas are telling. And then one should, therefore, faith and humility, these two play a very important role on the path of devotional service. So on one hand, one has faith that the instructions that are coming down are perfect. And on the other hand, there is humility to accept that I'm insignificant, my understanding is very limited. So why should I doubt? So therefore, on the path of devotional service, these two qualities have been, a lot of emphasis has been given on these two qualities. So the progress on the path of devotional service entirely depends on faith, from Kanishta to Madhyam to Uttam. And so to the degree one is humble, then one understands, okay, I'm a fool. My understanding is limited. So whatever the seniors are giving instructions, whatever they're doing, okay, it's perfect. Then one simply accepts. But if one does not have that humility, then yes, then the doubts come, and then one has one's perceptions and this and that. Of course, there's nothing wrong in clarification. One can always seek clarification. But once the clarification is given, then one must be ready to accept and then simply follow. And if one, even after receiving the clarification, if one doesn't understand, then one should think that it is my own anartha, it's due to my own contamination, I'm not able to understand. Maybe in the future I will understand. So with that humble mood, if one simply accepts, then one can make progress. So therefore, these qualities of, we saw in the previous section also in teachings of Sanat Kumar, the first quality which he mentions is Shraddha. You might have seen that. The first quality in those 15 ways of developing Rati, the first thing he says is Shraddha. So one needs to have that Shraddha, and if one has humility, then it becomes easier to develop the Shraddha. Otherwise one will always have doubts, and then things become more difficult. Samshayatma vinashyati, as Krishna tells in the Bhagavad Gita. So anyway, here I'm in Kanpur, and Devkinandan Prabhu was giving a class here. So he was speaking on Ramayana and tomorrow being Sita Navami. So he was telling this pastime. We may have heard this pastime many times, but in context of what we're discussing. So we know this pastime of how when Lord Ramchandra, he was lamenting for Sita and wandering in the forest. At that time, Lord Shiva and Parvati and Sati, they go to that forest, and then Lord Shiva and Sati, they see Lord Ramchandra. Lord Shiva offers his obeisances, but Sati does not offer. So, and then, so she asks Lord Shiva, to whom are you offering obeisances? So he says, I'm offering to Lord Ramachandra. And she asks, which Ramachandra? So he says that Ramchandra, who's the Paramatma in everyone's heart, who's present everywhere. So she says, I don't think so that this is that Ramachandra. So he says, Ramachandra is only one. There's no difference. But she cannot accept. And so then she says, no, I'll test him. I'll test him. And so even though Lord Shiva tried to pacify her, but she could not be pacified. And then Lord Shiva goes back, and then she tests. She transforms herself into Mother Sita, and then she comes in front of Lord Ram. And then whatever she tried to do, Lord Ram never showed any sign of recognizing her as Sita. And then finally, Lord Ram asks her, what are you doing in the forest alone? Where is your husband, Lord Shiva? Where is he? So immediately she was exposed. She understood, I've been exposed, even though I'm in the guise of Sita. And then she transforms herself, offers her obeisances, and went back. And then she goes back to Lord Shiva, and then Lord Shiva asks her what happened. And then she says, she initially, of course, she doesn't say, she says, I only went to have darshan of Lord Ramchandra. But anyway, Lord Shiva knew everything what happened. And then Lord Shiva said that because you have changed yourself, you have changed yourself into Mother Sita. So actually, I cannot accept you as a wife, because Mother Sita is mother. She's my mother. I cannot accept you as wife. And it was explained that this is one of the reasons why then that whole pastime of Daksha happened. And then actually Sati gave up her body, because she was actually not accepted by Lord Shiva as a wife because of that pastime. So the whole point is she doubted Lord Ramchandra. And so then because of that doubt, then there was a whole catastrophe that happened as a result of that. And therefore Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, Samshayatma vinashyati. So therefore Shraddha, having faith, having Shraddha is something which is very important. To the degree one has humility, then one can also develop the Shraddha, and one can openly accept instructions. And if one understands I'm a fool, then it's easy. To the degree one thinks I'm smart, then it's difficult. Then always doubts will come, oh, why they did this, why they did that. It's simply an obstacle. Is that okay, Satyapriya?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Oh, thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we'll just read one more verse before we take a break. Okay, we'll recite this verse, text 10. Bhagavad Dharmina sadho Shraddhaya yatata sada Bhaktir Bhagavati Brahmani Ananya Vishaya Bhavat. Maharaj Prithu thus engaged completely in devotional service, executing the rules and regulations strictly according to principles, 24 hours daily. Thus his love and devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna developed and became unflinching and fixed. So here also the word Shraddhaya is coming. Bhagavad Dharmina Sadho Shraddhaya Yatataha. So Sada, Prabhupada translates Sada as 24 hours. 24 hours daily with great faith. And Prabhupada is translating that faith as love and devotion. With love and devotion, one is endeavoring to worship the Supreme Lord. Bhakti is devotion. Bhagavati. So in this way, Prithu Maharaj is performing all these austerities, but as we already read, that he was doing all this simply to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That was his bhakti, he was the Supreme Lord. So the austerities were meant to control his mind and senses so that he can perform his bhakti better. So Prabhupada is quoting from Veer Raghavacharya. Bhagavad Dharmina is described by Veer Raghavacharya as Nivritta Dharmena, which indicates that it cannot be contaminated by material aspirations. Then he's quoting Anya Bilashita Shunyam. And so Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying that Maharaj Prithu's activities and devotional service enabled him to become fixed and steady in the discharge of devotional activities without having to take recourse to karma, jnana, or yoga. Okay, fine. So we will take a 15 minutes break and then we'll continue. Thank you. Hare Krishna. By regularly discharging devotional service, Prithu Maharaj became transcendental in mind and could therefore constantly think of the lotus feet of the Lord. Because of this, he became completely detached and attained perfect knowledge by which he could transcend all doubt. Thus, he was freed from the clutches of false ego and the material conception of life. Okay, so in this way, so by performance of devotional service, so he became totally detached and he was in full knowledge, jnanam, virakti. So we know these are the two byproducts of the performance of pure devotional service, jnana and vairagya. And so he attained that detachment and the perfect knowledge. And at the same time, he became free from the false ego and the material conception of life. Okay, so there are similar points that we have discussed, but the second paragraph is a beautiful paragraph. So maybe somebody can read the second and the third paragraphs of the book.
At present, we have contacted a material body, material mind, and material intelligence. But when we become free from these material conditions, our spiritual body, spiritual mind, and spiritual intelligence become manifest. In that transcendental state, a devotee attains all the benefits of karma, jnana, and yoga. Although he never engages in fruitive activities or empiric speculation to attain mystic powers, automatically mystic power appears in his service. A devotee does not want any kind of material opulence, but such opulence appears before him automatically. He does not have to endeavor for it. Because of his devotional service, he automatically becomes Brahmabhuta. As stated before, this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo vyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who is engaged in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Because of his regular discharge of devotional service, a devotee attains the transcendental stage of life. Since his mind is transcendentally situated, he cannot think of anything but the lotus feet of the Lord. This is the meaning of the word samsmarana anupurtaya. By constantly thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord, the devotee immediately becomes situated in Shuddha Sattva. Shuddha Sattva refers to that platform which is above the modes of material nature, including the modes of goodness. In the material world, the mode of goodness is considered to be representative of the highest perfection, but one has to transcend this mode and come to the stage of Shuddha Sattva, or pure goodness, where the three qualities of material nature cannot act.
Okay, so we already discussed this point that by performance of devotional service, one comes to the transcendental platform, and he automatically gets the result of all the other yogic process, all the other transcendental paths, karma, jnana, yoga. He gets all the mystic siddhis and liberation, everything he gets, and then he comes to the transcendental platform by samsmarana anupurtya, by remembering the lotus feet of the Lord. And so that's how the devotional service is superior to all the other processes, and a devotee automatically gets the results of all the other paths. Therefore, towards the end of the purport, Prabhupada says, by discharging devotional service, Maharaj Prithu automatically transcended all these positions. Since Maharaj Prithu was a Shaktivesh incarnation of the Supreme Lord, he did not have to act in any way to attain liberation. He came from the Vaikuntha world or spiritual sky in order to execute the will of the Supreme Lord on earth. Consequently, he wants to return home back to Godhead without having to execute jnana, yoga, or karma. Although Prithu Maharaj was eternally a pure devotee of the Lord, he nonetheless adopted the process of devotional service in order to teach the people in general the proper process for executing the duties of life and ultimately returning home back to Godhead. So Maharaj Prithu didn't have to do all this, but he did this simply to set an example. Okay, we have just a second. We have a commentary on this verse. So somebody can please read this commentary.
Just as a person sometimes takes some medicine to help quickly digest food, even though the digestive fire will digest food, Prithu, being anxious to attain direct service to the Lord in his abode and unable to tolerate the delay, performed Brahmanyan to destroy his subtle body. By that very sharp jnana, he cut the subtle body or covering, Jiva Kosham, a source of doubt. Prithu's doubt was, I have not seen the Lord directly by my bhakti. Do I have a subtle body or not? Actually, Prithu did not have a subtle body. He was an avatara of the Lord. Prithu's desire to give up his body by yoga is only showing the greatness of his devotion, in which he thinks of himself as an ordinary person. Mention of giving up his body is the only for letting the materialistics preserve their mentality. This appearance is handled by Maya in case of both the avatars and the devotees. Among the forms of Lord, Rama does not give his body, and among the devotees, Dhruva does not give up his body.
Give up.
These examples indicate the truth for all forms of the Lord and perfected devotees. This conclusion is given for the devotees.
Okay, so he's making the point that actually all this was not required for Prithu Maharaj. But still, so 2 points is mentioning. One point is that he wanted to hasten giving up the body. So as we will see in the later purports also, that Prithu Maharaj is using these processes of jnana and yoga in order to give up his body at according to his will, because the yogis have that siddhi of giving up the body at their will. So therefore, he's using those processes to hasten his giving up his gross and subtle bodies. So that is one point. Otherwise, he doesn't have to do. And so he gives the example that even though food will get digested anyway, naturally, but one may take medicine to hasten the digestion. So similarly, Prithu Maharaj is anyways going to go back to Godhead, but still he wanted to hasten the process, and therefore he's taking help of these processes of jnana and yoga. That is one point. And the second point he mentions is that as far as Prithu Maharaj is concerned, he's thinking of himself as an ordinary person. He's not thinking, I'm an avatar, I don't have to do all this. So he's thinking of himself as an ordinary person. That is his bhakti. Bhakti automatically develops humility. And so he's humbly thinking that I'm an ordinary person, so I need to perform all this to purify myself. And so therefore he's performing all this. That's another point. And another point which is mentioning is that it also helps the materialists to preserve their mentality. That means the materialists then in that way, the materialists cannot recognize the great avatars and the great devotees. They cannot recognize. And the Lord doesn't want them to recognize also. So Yogamaya Samavrita. Naham Prakasha Sarvasya Yogamaya Samavrita. So in this way, the Lord keeps the materialists covered, keeps them in their illusion. And that's how they are unable to recognize the Lord and his devotees. So these are the various reasons why Prithu Maharaj is going through all these various processes, though he's a Shaktivesh avatar and he actually doesn't have to go through all right. Okay, text 12. When he became... Okay, go ahead.
Prabhuji, in this purport it is given that the devotee comes to the Shuddha Sattva platform, which is better than the three modes, goodness, passion, ignorance. So here, I just wanted to ask that because in this material world, even the mode of goodness is little bit tainted with mode of passion and ignorance.
Correct.
So here, when they are mentioning as Shuddha Sattva, does it mean the material Shuddha Sattva without any traces of passion and ignorance, or is it different? It is translated as the Shuddha Sattva.
Shuddha Sattva is only one. What do you mean by material and transcendental? Shuddha Sattva is Shuddha Sattva. There is no difference, material, spiritual. So Shuddha Sattva is always Shuddha Sattva. That means without any contamination of Rajas and Tamas. That is basically what is called Shuddha Sattva. Sattvam, Vishuddham, Vasudeva, Shabditam. So that is Vishuddha Sattva platform. There is only one. There are no two types of Vishuddha Sattva.
So Prabhuji, then
So,
what we refer as normal Sattva, that means it includes a little bit of Tamagun, Rajagun. That's why I call it only Sattva. But Shuddha
yes.
Sattva means exclusive only Sattva.
Yeah, so that's transcendental platform basically. When we say Shuddha Sattva, it is Vasudeva platform. That is the transcendental platform. It is beyond the three modes. So you can see here, Shuddha Sattva refers to that platform which is above the modes of material nature, including the mode of goodness.
So that means it is spiritual, basically.
Yes, it is transcendental platform.
So Prabhuji, like now we are practicing devotees. So we are like informed that we should stay in the mode of goodness.
Yes.
So maybe in the material sense, so that like taking bath, getting up early, these things. So by doing that, actually we are going in the mode of goodness in the material world. And then
Yes.
when we connect it to Krishna, then it becomes Shuddha Sattva. We should take it like that. Means doing sattvic activities for the pleasure of Krishna only.
See, in the material world, as long as one is in the material world, then definitely the influence of the modes is always there. And so we may try to adopt a sattvic lifestyle, which is, as we know, conducive to come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva. Goal is Shuddha Sattva, but the Sattva Gun is conducive for us to come to that platform. The common example of the runway for the aeroplane. So the goal is not the runway. The goal is to take off. But at least if we have a sattvic lifestyle, then that will be conducive. So in the material world, to always be in Sattva Gun is also a big challenge. I think so. We all have enough experience of that. So the Rajogun and Tamogun are always trying to influence. Simple example, as we're chanting the holy names, we're struggling with Tamogun and Rajogun. The Tamogun is making us feel sleepy. The Rajogun is making the mind wander in all the planetary systems. So there's always the influence of Rajogun and Tamogun, which is influencing our practices. So even to come to the Sattva Gun is a big challenge for us. But at the same time, if we continue the practices with the proper motives, without any contamination of any of the lower modes, no contamination of the lower modes means the proper motives to simply please Guru and Krishna. So if we at least do that, then gradually we can get more and more purified. And then gradually we'll be able to Mamchayo Avyabhicharina Bhakti, Avyabhicharini Bhakti, unalloyed devotional service. Then as we practice that type of devotional service, then gradually Sagunan Samutityeta. So it's a gradual process. So coming to the Shuddha Sattva platform means what? Bhava Bhakti. Shuddha Sattva, if you read Nectar of Devotion, when does Shuddha Sattva enter the devotional service? That is at the stage of Bhava. So Bhava platform is not so easy. Bhava platform is Sudurlabha.
So as a practicing devotees, we can only be a partial or sometimes be on Shuddha Sattva when we are servicing.
No.
Or
See, as far as practicing devotees, our devotional service is always contaminated by the modes till
Modes.
we come to the platform of Bhava.
okay, Prabhuji. Okay.
Till we
So-
come to the platform of Bhava, our devotional practices are going to be contaminated by the modes. Only on the platform of Bhava, Shuddha Sattva begins to enter. That is the point when one is actually on the liberated platform, free from the influence of the modes.
So, Prabhuji, for example, if we do one service, just a small service of say 10 minutes, with a good motive and with a good intention and in the mode of goodness, maybe for some time. So it will not be considered in a Shuddha Sattva, it will be considered in normal Sattva only. Should we take it like that? Or it will be like some part of Shuddha Sattva?
See, okay, if you consider one particular activity, so if that particular activity is 100% free from the influence of the modes, then we could say that that particular activity is on the transcendental platform.
For that much time?
Yes.
Okay, Prabhuji, that much.
But that is quite hypothetical.
But that is not possible to stabilize it as long as we become pure devotee. Okay, that is understood, Prabhuji.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Going to text 12. When he became completely free from the conception of body life, Maharaj Prithu realized Lord Krishna sitting in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. Being thus able to get all the instructions from him, that's the Paramatma, he gave up all of the practices of yoga and jnana. He was not even interested in the perfection of yoga and jnana systems, for he thoroughly realized that devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, and that unless the yogis and jnanis become attracted to Krishna Katha, narrations about Krishna, their illusions concerning existence can never be dispelled. So he totally became free from the bodily conception of life. He realized Krishna as the Paramatma, and then he perfectly understood that how Yavad Gadagraja Katha Suratim Napuryat. So unless one develops rati, an attraction for Gadagraja, that is Krishna Katha, one, even the Jnanis and Yogis, they cannot attain perfection. So as Prabhupada writes, actually the perfection of life depends on one's inclination to hear about Krishna. It is therefore mentioned in this verse, Yavad Gadagraja Kathasu Ratim Napuryat. Unless one becomes interested in Krishna and his pastimes and activities, there is no question of liberation by means of yoga practice or speculative knowledge. So but why? Because their liberation, the Jnanis and Yogis, they can come to the liberated platform, but then that liberation is not true liberation, because true liberation, as Prabhupada goes on to say, real Jnana means understanding that living entity is the eternal servant of the Lord. This knowledge is attained after many, many births. Bhavanam Janmanamante Jnanvan Mam Prapat. In the Paramahamsa stage of life, one fully realizes Krishna as everything. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. Okay, so that is the Paramahamsa stage, when one has a full realization of Krishna. So here, of course, Prithu Maharaj has reached that platform. Okay, text 13. In due course of time, when Prithu Maharaj was to give up his body, he fixed his mind firmly upon the lotus feet of Krishna, and thus completely situated on the Brahmabhuta platform, he gave up the material body. Okay, so he firmly fixed himself, Brahmabhuto Dridam Kale. So he was firmly fixed on the Brahmabhuta platform, the liberated platform, and so he fixed himself, fixed his mind upon the lotus feet of Krishna. And in that situation, he totally gave up his material body. Prabhupada writes the famous statement which Srila Prabhupada, Bengali proverb, Prabhupada very often quoted in his lectures, Bhajan karo, sadhan karo, mrityu janle hoy. Whatever spiritual progress one makes in life will be tested at the time of death. And then he's talking about that remembrance of Krishna at the time of death, which we discuss in the 8th chapter of the Gita. And so, of course, then the further verses is describing that how before he actually gave up his body, then how did he, what was the process he adopted to give up the body? So then that is being explained in the further verses, which is essentially the process of yoga. So this is a commentary to the 12th verse. Somebody can read this, please.
Described the concept of being the body. Chinna Anyadhi. He realized the form of Paramatma. Adhigata Atmagatihi. He had no desire for siddhis. Niriha. How could he give up all desires since he accepted the process of vidya or jnana? By jnana, vayunena, he destroyed the subtle body, idam, and then rejected jnana. He accepted jnana to destroy the subtle body and then rejected jnana. Thus, actually, he was without desire. The meaning is this. There are two types of results from Shuddha Bhakti. The primary, desired result, and the secondary, unsought results. The desired result is Prema Bhakti. The unsought result is Jnana, Siddhis, and other things. If a devotee has a desire for these secondary results that arrive on their own, his Bhakti becomes restricted. Antarayana vadanti eta yunjato yogam uttamam. Maya sampadyamanasya kalakshapana hetavaha. Learned experts state that the mystic perfections of yoga are actually impediments. For one who is practicing the supreme yoga, who is absorbed in my by having attained me, who is absorbed in me by having attained me, the siddhis are a waste of time. Srimad Bhagavatam 9.15.33. However, the ability to reject these secondary results depends on the strength of one's practice of Shuddha Bhakti. Sridhar Swami says Prithu did not have attraction to these secondary results because he was attracted to talks concerning Krishna.
Okay, so a nice explanation that how Shuddha Bhakti gives rise to these primary and secondary results. So if one's desire is only for the primary result, that is prema, then yes, then one can get that. But at the same time, one also gets the secondary results, that is the results of jnana, which is liberation, siddhis, that is the result of yoga, and even material opulences. One can get all this, the secondary results of the practice of Shuddha Bhakti. But if one gets attracted to the secondary results, then one will not get the primary result. So because Prithu Maharaj did not have attraction for the secondary results, why he did not have attraction? Because Yavad Gadagraja Katha Suratam Ratim Nakurya. So because of his rati, because of his great attraction for Krishna Katha, so therefore he did not get attracted to any of the secondary results, and therefore he was fixed in his devotional service, and therefore he was able to remember the lotus feet of the Lord and give up his body. And then text 14. Okay, Bhaktivinoda Prabhu, you have a question?
Probably in the previous verse, we see that Vishwanath Thakur mentioned that he didn't have a subtle body, and now here it is mentioned he destroyed the subtle body.
So of course, how can one have how can one live in this world without a subtle body?
Yeah, but like previous
yes. So the meaning is that subtle body basically means what? Man, buddhi, ahankar. So he didn't have any ahankar, false ego. That is the meaning of why? Because he was already an avatar.
Yeah.
He was already an avatar, Shaktavesh avatar. So therefore, he did not have any mithya ahankar, a false ego, misidentifying with the body. So that's the meaning of saying that he did not have a subtle body.
Okay.
Okay. And then as we already discussed, so actually he doesn't have to go through all these processes to destroy the subtle body and all that. But then simply to set an example, and he's thinking himself an ordinary person, therefore he's going through all this. Okay, so the process that he used to actually give up the body is the process of Shatchakra Yoga. That's what he describes in text 14. When Maharaj Prithu practiced a particular yogic sitting posture, he blocked the doors of his anus with his ankles, pressed his right and left calves, and gradually raised his life head upward, passing it on to the circle of his navel, up to his heart and throat, and finally push it upward, the central position between his two eyebrows. Okay, so this is the process of yoga. And the Shat Chakra Yoga. Prabhupada in the purport is talking about the the various chakras and how one elevates the soul to the Agnya chakra. So after giving those list of chakras and all that, then after that Prabhupada is writing, the conclusion is that one has to come to the Brahmabhuta stage for going back to Godhead. However, those who are in Krishna consciousness or who are practicing Bhakti Yoga, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, can return to Godhead without even practicing the Muktasana process. The purpose of Muktasana practice is to come to the Brahmabhuta stage. So without being on the Brahmabhuta stage, one cannot be promoted to spiritual sky. So one has to come to the Brahmabhuta stage, liberated platform, before one can actually enter the spiritual sky. So, but the devotees don't have to do something separate to come to the Brahmabhuta platform. By practicing devotional service itself, one comes to the Brahmabhuta platform. Therefore, again, he's quoting that Mahaprabhu. And again, he says the Bhakti Yogi practicing Bhakti Yoga is always situated on the Brahmabhuta stage, Brahmabhuyaya Kalpate. If a devotee is able to continue on the Brahmabhuta platform, he enters the spiritual sky automatically after death and returns to Godhead. Consequently, a devotee need not feel sorry for not having practiced the Kundalini chakra or not penetrating the 6 chakras one after another. As far as Maharaj Prithu was concerned, he had already practiced this process. Okay, please note this point. He had already practiced this process, and since he did not want to wait for the time when his death would occur naturally, he took advantage of the Shat Chakra penetration process and thus gave up the body according to his own free will and immediately entered the spiritual sky. So that is the reason why he practiced all this. One thing is he already knew this practice. And so therefore he is using this practice in order to give up his body at his own free will. Text 15. In this way, Prithu Maharaj gradually raised his air of life up to the hole in his skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually, he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within his body with the totality of fire. So basically, okay, this verse and the next verse speaks about how he merged all his elements in the total elements, understanding that ultimately all these bodily elements are part of the total elements. So basically, this is again, you'll find it in other, and I think so you find it in the first canto, 15th chapter also, I think so in case of Maharaj Yudhishthira. So he also goes through these various processes. So these are processes of Jnana and Yoga, whereby one is intellectually trying to free oneself from the material conception by considering that all these material elements of my body, both gross and subtle, are not mine. So he's trying to become detached from the various gross and subtle material elements by trying to understand that these don't belong to me. They actually belong to the total material elements of the universe. And in this way, one actually becomes totally detached from the gross and subtle bodies. Okay, so that's the process that is being described in these two verses, 15 and 16. In this way, according to the different positions of the various parts of the body, Prithu Maharaj merged the wholes of his senses with the sky, his body liquids such as blood and various secretions with the totality of water, and he merged earth with water, then water with fire, fire with air, air with sky, and so on. And then text 17, he amalgamated the mind with the senses, senses with the sense objects according to the respective positions. And he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, Mahatattva. So it's very interesting. In the second paragraph of the purport, Prabhupada is writing. Okay, somebody can read the second paragraph of the purport, text 17.
When the mind is completely washed of all material contamination, the pure consciousness acts. The sound vibration from the spiritual kaya can automatically cleanses all material contaminations, as confirmed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Cheto Darpanamarjanam. We need only take the advice of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna mantra to cleanse the mind of all material contamination, and this may be considered the summary of this difficult verse.
Yes, so very interesting point. Prabhupada is saying, ultimately, the meaning of all this is for us, the practical application of all this is simply chant Hare Krishna. That's all. So we don't have to bother about doing all this, what has been mentioned over here. This is for the Jnanis and Yogis to go through all this exercise to become detached from the bodily concept. But by simply chanting the holy names, one can become free from the bodily concept. Okay, please continue.
As soon as the whole material contamination is washed away by this process of chanting, all desires and reactions to material activities become immediately vanquished, and real life, peaceful existence begins. In this age of Kali, it is very difficult to adopt the yogic process mentioned in this verse. Unless one is very expert in such yoga, the best course is to adopt the ways and means of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Thus, one can gloriously become freed from all material contaminations by the simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just as life in this material world has its beginning in material sound, similarly in spiritual life as its beginning in this spiritual sound vibration.
Yes. So that's the practical application as far as we are concerned, how to go about becoming detached. Okay, somebody can read this commentary from the screen.
Seeing that one of the siddhis dying at will had arrived, Prithu developed a desire to accept that, just as he had accepted jnana, since he desired to go quickly to the side of the Lord. Being taught the method of leaving the body by the siddhi, who was like an expert in karma rituals, Prithu easily prepared to leave his body by his will. That is described in 6 verses. He was the best of the courageous. Giving up the body at this time, becoming a pure spiritual form, immediately let me go to Vaikuntha and serve the feet of the Lord. This was his great eagerness. Fixing his mind, Atmanam, on his form as an associate of the Lord, Atmani, becoming a pure spiritual form, Brahma Bhutaha. He left his body.
Okay, so as we read, Srila Prabhupada also mentions the point that because he already practiced this process, he was simply using it so that he can quickly give up his body at his will. So here he mentions that. So one of the siddhis, dying at will, had arrived. And so Prithu is using that so that he can quickly go to the Lord. So that's how he's giving up his body. And the 18th verse, that's the last verse of the section. Prithu Maharaj then offered the total designation of the living entity under the supreme controller of illusory energy. Being released from all the designations by which the living entity became entrapped, he became free by knowledge and renunciation, and by the spiritual force of his devotional service. In this way, being situated in his original constitutional position of Krishna consciousness, he gave up his body as a Prabhu, or a controller of the senses. So Prabhupada is explaining here what is the real meaning of the word Prabhu in the second paragraph of purport. When Prithu Maharaj became spiritually powerful by the enhancement of his spiritual knowledge, jnana, and renunciation of material desires, he became Prabhu, or master of his senses, sometimes called Goswami or Swami. So that's the real meaning of Prabhu. When one is strong enough to give up the influence of material energy, he is called Prabhu. So we address each other as Prabhu. So at least each one of us should think that this is our goal. So I'm being called Prabhu. I'm not a Prabhu right now. I'm only a Das, but my goal is to come to this platform where I become free from the influence of the material energy. So the real identity of the individual soul lies in understanding or attaining the knowledge that he's eternally a servant of Krishna. This understanding is called as Swarupa Pulabdhi. So to come to understand one's true Swarupa as an eternal servant of Krishna, that is Swarupa Pulabdhi or Swarupastha. And then in the next paragraph, Prabhupada is giving the understanding of Prabhupada. The spiritual master is addressed as Prabhupada because he's completely self-realized soul. The word Pada means position, and Prabhupada indicates that he's given the position of Prabhu, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for he acts on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one is a Prabhu or controller of the senses, he cannot act as spiritual master who is authorized by the Supreme Prabhu or Lord Krishna. Okay, so in this way, Maharaj Prithu, he gave up his body and now he's ascending to the spiritual world. So now the next section from 19 to 30 describes how Queen Archie, how she also gave up her body, and she also ascends to the spiritual world, and how the demigods are praising her. Okay, somebody can read the translations from 19 to 24.
The queen, the wife of Prithu Maharaj, whose name was Archie, followed her husband into the forest. Since she was a queen, her body was very delicate. Although she did not deserve to live in the forest, she voluntarily touched her lotus feet to the ground. Although she was not accustomed to such difficulties, Queen Archie followed her husband in the regulative principles of living in the forest like great sages. She lay down on the ground and ate only fruits, flowers, and leaves. And because she was not fit for these activities, she became frail and thin. Yet because of the pleasure she derived in serving her husband, she did not feel any difficulties. When Queen
Good.
Archie saw that her husband, who had been so merciful to her and the earth, no longer showed symptoms of life, she lamented for a little while and then built a fiery pyre on top of a hill and placed the body of her husband on it. After this, the queen executed the necessary funerary functions and offered oblations of water. After bathing in the rivers, she offered obeisances to various demigods situated in the sky in the different planetary systems. She then circumambulated the fire and, while thinking of the lotus feet of her husband, entered its flames. After observing this brave act performed by the chaste wife Archie, the wife of the great king Prithu, many thousands of the wives of the demigods, along with their husbands, offered prayers to the queen, for they were very much satisfied.
Okay, so here it's mentioned how Archie, she followed her husband into the forest, and she was faithfully performing all the austerities which her husband was performing, even though she was not used to all that. Srila Prabhupada gives the examples of how Mother Sita, tomorrow is Sita Navami, the appearance of Mother Sita. So how she also followed Lord Ram into the forest, even though she was not expected to do that, but because of the chastity and her duty towards her husband, she followed. And also there's the example of Mother Gandhari, who, because her husband was blind, she blindfolded herself. And so in the purport to text 20, then in the purport to text 20, Srila Prabhupada mentions about how boys and girls need to be trained. So the boys need to be trained in brahmacharya and the girls need to be trained in chastity. And thus, when a girl and boy are united, both are trained for a life dedicated to a higher purpose. So the proper training is very essential. And then he gives the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu after he took sannyas, how Vishnu Priya, she chanted the beads, and after finishing one round, she collected 1 grain of rice. And this way, as many rounds as she chanted, she would receive the same number of rice grains and then cook them and so take prasad. Okay. And then Prabhupada, towards the end of the purport, is making the point that so even the Queen Archie, she became very frail and thin, but then still she was very satisfied. From where did that satisfaction come? The satisfaction came because of serving her great husbands. So that's an important point for us to note. Satisfaction always comes by service. That's what the Bhagavatam is saying. Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhakti radokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasiddhati. So when one performs devotional service without any motives, without any interruption, in all circumstances, whether circumstances are favorable, unfavorable, but still one continues on in the practice of devotional service, and that actually gives one great satisfaction. So And then finally she put the body of her husband on the pyre, and then she also entered into the flames along with her husband. And then seeing this, then the demigods had gathered in the sky to see this glorious event, and they're showering flowers. And then the wives of the demigods, they are speaking from text 25, glorifying Queen Archi. These wives of the demigods are speaking. So what are the wives of the demigods speaking? So that goes from 25 to 28. Somebody can read these translations, 25 to 28.
The wives of the demigods said, "All glories to Queen Archi. We can see that this queen of the great King Prithu, the emperor of all kings of the world, has served her husband with mind, speech, and body exactly as the goddess of fortune serves the supreme personality of Godhead, Yagnesh or Vishnu." The wives of the demigods continued, "Just see how this chaste lady, Archi, by dint of her inconceivable pious activity, is still following her husband upward, as far as we can see. In this material world, every human being has a short span of life, but those who are engaged in devotional service go back home, back to Godhead, for they are actually on the path of liberation. For such persons, there is nothing which is not available. Any person who engages himself with this material world, within this material world, in performing activities that necessitates great struggle, and who, after obtaining a human form of life, which is chance to attain liberation from the miseries, undertakes the difficult task of fruitive activities, must be considered to be cheated and envious of his own self."
Okay. So in this way, the wives of the demigods are glorifying Queen Archi because she very carefully served her husband with mind, body, speech. She served her husband, and so therefore she is glorified because of the service. And so now so they're glorifying that, just like Mother Lakshmi serves Vishnu, Archi also served her husband. And the result of that is that she's following the husband. So, okay, the purport to text 26 is an important one. Somebody can read this purport to text 26.
Both Prithu Maharaj's airplane and the airplane carrying Queen Archi were passing out of the vision of the ladies of the higher planetary systems. These ladies were simply astonished to see how Prithu Maharaj and his wife achieved such an exalted position. Although they were the wives of the denizens of the higher planetary system, and Prithu Maharaj was an inhabitant of an inferior planetary system, the Earth, the king along with his wife passed beyond the realms of demigods and went upward to Vaikuntha Lok. The word Udvan, upward, is significant here, but the ladies speaking were from the higher planetary systems, which include the moon, sun, and Venus up to Brahmaloka, are the highest planet. Beyond Brahmaloka is the spiritual sky, and in that spiritual sky there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets. The word Urdhvam indicates that the Vaikuntha planets are beyond or above these material planets, and it was to these Vaikuntha planets that Prithu Maharaj and his wife were going. This also indicates that when Prithu Maharaj and his wife Archi abandoned their material bodies in the material fire, they immediately developed their spiritual bodies in the material spiritual bodies and entered into the spiritual planets, airplanes, which could penetrate the material elements and reach the spiritual sky. Since they were carried by two separate airplanes, it may be concluded that even after being burned in the funeral pyre, they remain separate individual persons. In other words, they never lost their identity or became void as imagined by the impersonalist.
Prabhupada never leaves a chance to smash the impersonalists. Even here he's doing that. Continue.
The ladies in the higher planetary systems were capable of seeing both downward and upward, When they looked down, they could see that the body of Prithu Maharaj was being burned and that his wife Achi was entering into the fire. And then when they looked upward, they could see how they were being carried in 2 airplanes to the Vaikuntha planets. All of this is possible simply by Dhruva Bhavena Karmana, inconceivable activity. Prithu Maharaj was a pure devotee and his wife Achi, Queen Achi, simply followed her husband. That they can both be considered pure devotees and that they are capable of performing inconceivable activities. Such activities are not possible for ordinary men. Indeed, ordinary men cannot even take to the devotional service of the Lord. Nor can ordinary women maintain such vows of chastity and follow their husbands in all respects. A woman does not need to attain high qualifications, but if she simply follows in the footsteps of her husband, who must be a devotee, then both husband and wife attain liberation and are promoted to the Vaikuntha planets, Vaikuntha Lokas. This is evinced by the inconceivable activities of Maharaj Prithu and his wife.
Okay, so both Prithu Maharaj and his wife both went to the Vaikuntha Lokas. So Archie, simply by following her husband, who was definitely a pure devotee, so then the wife also achieves the same destination. And so therefore, the Devatas, these wives of the demigods, are glorifying life on the earthly planets that we also saw in the Bhagavatam classes that were going on in the temple. So we have read in the 5th canto also, the demigods glorify life on the earthly planets, because on the heavenly planets, even though they have so much of opulence, they forget the Supreme Lord, but on the earthly planet, there is a good scope for performing pure devotional service and perfecting one's life. And so therefore, here also the wives of the demigods are glorifying the human beings on the earthly planet, who they may have a short life, but still they have the opportunity to practice pure devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada quotes this famous verse from the 11th canto. Nirdehamadyam sulabam sudulabam lavam sukalpam gurukarnadharam mayanukulena navaspati kuman bhavabdam taret atmaha. So one, in spite of having all these facilities, that's what verse number 28, even these wives of the demigods are saying, that if one has all these facilities, but having obtained human form of life, which is a chance to attain liberation, if one does not take advantage, then it's considered to be cheated and envious of his own self. So that's a similar thing. Atmaha, killer of his own soul. So Prabhupada is wasting time and life in this way is the same as committing suicide. And towards the end, Prabhupada is quoting from Jiva Goswami, advises that in this human form of life, one's only aim should be to go back home, back to Godhead. The words Sarvanchita indicate that once a person has obtained the human form of life, he's actually cheated if he does not make preparations to go back home, back to Godhead. The position of all non-devotees who are not interested in going back to Godhead is very much lamentable. But the human form of life is meant for executing devotional service and nothing else. Okay, so we are all very fortunate to have got the human form of life, and not only just the human form of life in Bharatvarsha, and not only in Bharatvarsha, but in this Kali Yuga, where Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has descended. So with all these advantages, if one does not take Krishna consciousness seriously, then definitely one is Atmaha, one is cheating oneself. One is cheating oneself. One is not cheating anyone else. One is cheating oneself if one does not take Krishna consciousness seriously. So vanchita, cheated. Atmadruk means envious of himself. So this is a very important point for us to contemplate on. So if we don't practice Krishna consciousness seriously, so we are practicing Krishna consciousness basically for our own deliverance. If we don't practice Krishna consciousness seriously, we are cheating our own selves. We are envious of our own selves. Atma Druk. So it's not that we are practicing devotional service. By practicing devotional service, we're not doing a favor to the Supreme Lord. We're not doing a favor to other Vaishnavas. Okay, we can inspire them, we can help them, but the main favor is to oneself. So therefore, even Prahlad Maharaj, he says that the Supreme Lord, he is Nijalabha Purno. He is totally satisfied in himself. But when we practice devotional service, then it is I who get the benefits. So therefore, we always have to keep that in mind, that by practicing devotional service seriously, it is I who stand to gain. Otherwise, Sa vanchito batatma druk. So one is being cheated. Oneself is cheating oneself. So sometimes one may think, oh, now authorities are not very serious about my sadhana, my attendance, my this, my that. So it's okay if I be a little loose. But one has to understand that I am a spirit soul trapped in this body, encaged in this body. It is I who need to get out, to get liberated from this material engagement. I'm not doing a favor to anybody else. So if I practice devotional service sincerely, I'm doing a favor to myself, not to anybody else. Otherwise, I am cheating my own self. We have to realize this. Okay, so that's the end of the pastime. And so both Prithu Maharaj and Queen Archie, they have gone back home, back to Godheads. And now Maitreya Rishi is concluding the pastime. So text 29, the great sage Maitreya continued speaking, my dear Vidura, when the wives of the denizens of heaven were thus talking amongst themselves, Queen Archie reached the planet which her husband Maharaj Prithu, the topmost self-realized soul, had attained. Please read this purport, it's an important one.
According to Vedic scriptures, a woman who dies with her husband or enters into the fire in which her husband is burning also enters the same planet her husband attains. In this material world, there is a planet known as Patiloka, just as there is a planet known as Pitraloka. But in this verse, the word Patiloka does not refer to any planet within this material universe. For Prithu Maharaj, being topmost among self-realized souls, certainly return home back to Godhead and attain one of the Vaikuntha planets. Queen Archie also entered Patiloka, but this planet is not in the material universe, for she actually enters the planet which her husband attained. In the material world also, when a woman dies with her husband, she again unites with him in the next birth. Similarly, Maharaj Prithu and Queen Archie united in the Vaikuntha planets. In the Vaikuntha planet, there are husband and wives, but there is no question of their giving birth to a children or having sex life. In the Vaikuntha planet, both husband and wife are extraordinarily beautiful and they are attracted to one another, but they do not enjoy sex life. Indeed, they consider sex not to be very relishable because both husband and wife are always absorbed in Krishna consciousness and in glorifying and chanting the glories of the Lord. According to Bhakti Vinod Thakur also, a husband and wife can turn the home into a place as good as Vaikuntha, even while in this material world. Being absorbed in Krishna consciousness in this world, husband and wife can live in Vaikuntha simply by installing the deity of the Lord within the home and serving the deity according to the directions of Shastra. In this way, they will never feel the sex urge. That is the taste of advancement in devotional service. One who is advanced in devotional service is never attracted by sex life. And as soon as one becomes detached from sex life and professionally attached to the service of the Lord, he actually experiences living in the Vaikuntha planet, in the ultimate Yeshu. There is actually no material world, but when one forgets the service of the Lord and engage himself in the service of his senses, he is said to be living in the material world.
Yes, so both of them actually attain the Vaikuntha planets. So the verse says that they Pati Lokam, it is said Pati Lokam, the planet where the husband had gone. But as far as Prithu and Arshi are concerned, this Pati Loka is one of the Vaikuntha planets, because that is where Prithu Maharaj went, and then Queen Arshi also went to the Vaikuntha planets. And then Prabhupada is explaining that how in the Vaikuntha planets, both men and women are there, very beautiful, but they're not interested in sex life because they are absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in glorifying and chanting the glories of the Lord. So that is the way to become free from sex desires, by being absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So to the degree one is absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in chanting and glorifying the Lord, and to that degree, one can give up all these material attractions of this world. So as Prabhupada is writing, one who's advanced in devotional service is never attracted by sex life. And as soon as one becomes detached from sex life and proportionately attached to the service of the Lord, so it's a direct proportion. So more one is detached from sex life, more one becomes attached to service of the Lord. So it's a direct proportion, proportionately attached to the service of the Lord. Then he actually experiences living in the Vaikuntha planets because he's always remembering Krishna. So even while living in this material world, it is as good as Vaikuntha. And then finally, the last section of the chapter is Phalashruti. What are the benefits of hearing, reading, and speaking this pastime of Prithu Maharaj? So somebody can just read the translations of the remaining verses.
Prabhuji, one clarification was there.
Go ahead.
Prabhuji, in this purport is mentioned Pati Lok. So this Pati Lok is a concept, or I think because it's not a planet anyway. Wherever the husband goes, that Lok is Pati Lok for the woman. Correct? No?
Yes, that's right. So as Prabhupada is writing here, that when in the material world also, when a woman dies with her husband, she again unites with him in the next birth. So in the material world, if somebody dies, then obviously they'll go to some material planet. So it will be some planet in the material universe only, because they are materially conditioned, materially contaminated. So it will be some planet in the material universe. So based upon their karma, their activities. So
it is not a
it is
planet.
not one fixed planet. That's my understanding. I don't think so. It is one fixed planet, but based upon their karma, they will, if they, since they are materially conditioned, then obviously they will be in one of the planets in the material universe.
Prabhuji,
what is a practical application of these kind of points which Prabhupada writes in purports?
What is the practical application? Practical application is both husband and wife should go to Vaikuntha and not go to Pati Lok in the material world. So of course, Prabhupada is saying Pati Lok could be in the material world also, Pati Lok could be in Vaikuntha also. So as far as the application is concerned, Prabhupada is saying that, so one can, both husband and wife can actually make the home into Vaikuntha, even while in this material world. So Prabhupada is giving a whole practical application there in the second paragraph. Even in this world, husband and wife can live in Vaikuntha simply by installing the deity, serving the deity. So that is the practical application. And for brahmacharis also the same thing applies. Being absorbed in Krishna consciousness, glorifying and chanting, then one can go to Vaikuntha. One can go to Golok Vrindavan. What else is the practical application? Huh?
Yes, Raji, it's clear. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Okay, somebody can read the remaining translations.
Verse number 30. Maitreya continued. The greatest of all devotees, Maharaj Prithu, was very powerful and his character was liberal, magnificent and magnanimous. Thus, I have described him to you as far as possible. 31. Any person who describes the great characteristics of King Prithu with faith and determination, whether he reads or hears of them himself or helps others to hear of them, is certain to attain the very planet which Maharaj Prithu attained. In other words, such a person also returns home to the Vaikuntha planets, back to Godhead. 32. If one hears of the characteristics of Prithu Maharaj and is a Brahmana, he becomes perfectly qualified with Brahmanical powers. If he is a Kshatriya, he becomes a king of the world. If he is a Vaishya, he becomes a master of other Vaishyas and many animals. And if he is a Shudra, he becomes the topmost devotee. 33. It does not matter whether one is a man or woman. Anyone who, with great respect, hears this narration of Maharaj Prithu will become the parent of many children, if without children, and will become the richest if without money. 34. Also, one who hears this narration 3 times will become very reputable if he is not recognized in the society, and he'll become a great scholar if he is illiterate. In other words, hearing of the narrations of Prithu Maharaj is so auspicious and it drives away all bad luck. 35. By hearing the narration of Prithu Maharaj, one can become great, increase his duration of life, gain promotion to the heavenly planets, and counteract the contaminations of this age of Kali. In addition, one can promote the causes of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Therefore, from all sides, it is advisable for a materialistic person who is interested in such things to read and hear the narrations of the life and character of Prithu Maharaj. 36. If a king who is desirous of attaining victory and ruling power chants the narration of Prithu Maharaj 3 times before going forth on his chariot, all subordinate kings will automatically render all kinds of taxes unto him, as he rendered them unto Maharaj Prithu, simply upon his order. 37. A pure devotee who is executing the different processes of devotional service may be situated in the transcendental position, being completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But even he, while discharging devotional service, must hear, read, and induce others to hear about the character and life of Prithu Maharaj. 38. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, I have, as far as possible, spoken narrations about Prithu Maharaj which enrich one's devotional attitude. Whoever takes advantage of these benefits also goes back home, back to Godhead like Maharaj Prithu. 39. Whoever with great reverence and adoration regularly reads, chants, and describes the history of Maharaj Prithu's activities will certainly increase unflinching faith and attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. Lord's lotus feet are the boat by which one can cross the oceans of Nisans.
Okay, so this last verse we will recite, and somebody can also read the purport. Anudinam midam madarena shrinvan Prithu charitam pratayana sangaha Bhagavati bhavasandhu bhutapade sacha nirgunam labate ratim. Is it the purport?
Whoever with great reverence and adoration regularly reads, chants, and describes the history of Maharaj Prithu's activities will certainly increase unflinching faith and attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord's lotus feet are the boat by which one can cross the ocean of Nisans. Purport: the word Bhava Sindhu Potapade is significant in this verse. The lotus feet of the Lord are known as Mahat Padam. This means that the total source of material existence rests on the lotus feet of the Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavaha. Everything is emanating from him. This cosmic manifestation, which is compared to an ocean of nescience, is also resting on the lotus feet of the Lord. As such, this great ocean of nescience is minimized by a person who is a pure devotee. One who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord need not cross over the ocean, for he has already crossed it by virtue of his position at the Lord's lotus feet. By hearing and chanting of the glories of the Lord or the Lord's devotee, one can become firmly fixed in the service of Lord's. By hearing and chanting, the one who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord need not cross over the ocean, for he has already crossed it by virtue of his position at the Lord's lotus feet. By hearing and chanting of the glories of the Lord or the Lord's devotee, one can become firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. This position can also be achieved very easily by narrating the history of the life of Prithu Maharaj regularly, every day. The word Vimukta Sangaha is also significant in this connection. Because we associate with the three qualities of material nature, our position in this material world is full of dangers. But when we engage in the devotional service of the Lord, by the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam, we immediately become Vimukta Sangha or liberated. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 23rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Maharaj Prithu's Going Back Home.
So this verse is telling some very important points as to how we should be hearing and chanting. So here it says Anudinam, Anudinam, day after day. So every day. So this word Anudinam also comes there, isn't it? Anudinam idam adarena srinvan. Also in that verse, Nectar of Instruction, 7th verse. What is that? Syat Krishna Nama Charitadi Sitapya Vidya Pitto Patapta Rasanasya Narochikano Kintu Kintwadarat Anudinam. So same thing here. So Anudinam Adarena. So there also same thing. Kintwadarat Anudinam Karuseva Jishta Swadvi Kramat Bhavati Tadgad Mula Hantri. Okay, so here also same words are used. Anudinam, day after day, every day. So this is a process which one has to do every day. And what should be the mood or the attitude, the consciousness in which one is reading and hearing? Adarena, with great respect. So when there is respect, then there is attention. So that's automatic. So when there is a respect towards a person, then one hears with great attention, one takes everything very seriously. And to the degree one does not have that respect, then everything is taken very casually. So to the degree one hears with great respect, great attention, then to that degree one will get the results, as is being spoken of in this verse. So though here it is in reference to Prithu Charitam specifically, but then it applies to any Charitam. It applies to any hearing and chanting that one does. So if one regularly hears with great reverence and adoration, Prabhupada is that Adarena, Prabhupada is translating as reverence and adoration. Regularly reads, chants, describes. Then the result will be Vimukta Sangha. Then one will be liberated from the three modes, from this material world. Because then the Bhava Sindhu Potapadi, then the Bhava Sindhu will one can cross in the boat of the boats of the lotus feet of the Lord. Then one develops Labate Rathim. Then one can develop the great attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. And when one develops that attraction for the lotus feet, then the lotus feet act like a boat to cross over the ocean of material nations. An important point which Prabhupada mentions in the purport to text 31, he describes that, so here he quotes the famous verse, Aradnam Sarvesham Vishnu Aradnam Param Tasmad Parataram Devi Tadyanam Samarchanam. So Prabhupada writes the translation of that. And then he says that the fact of explaining The fact is explained herein that hearing and chanting about a Vaishnav is as good as hearing and chanting about Vishnu. For Maitreya is explained that anyone who hears about Prithu Maharaj with attention also attains the planet where Maharaj Prithu attained. There is no duality between Vishnu and the Vaishnav, and this is called as Advaya Gyan. A Vaishnav is as important as Vishnu. So therefore, we should not underestimate the glorification of the Acharyas, of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so reading that glorification is also equally important because there is no difference between Vishnu and Vaishnav. And then it tells the pastime of Mahaprabhu glorifying the gopis. Okay, and then all this Falashruti is there. So many material things. So it all depends on what we desire. Because devotional service can give everything. Akama sarva kamava moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena gayata purusham param. So whatever one desires, pure devotional service can give. So it all depends on our desires. So if we have material desires, even material desires can be fulfilled. That is why so many material desires, material things are also being promised. Because yes, that's the nature of devotional service. Can give anything. Okay. Yes, Bhakti Prabhu.
Harish Prabhuji, I had two questions. One is like, we see that Bhagavatam kicks out all the Kaitava Dharma.
What's it, say that again, please?
Bhagavatam kicks out all the Kaitava Dharma. Right? It gives pure bhakti, but at the same time, we see in so many episodes where the Falashruti is very much like it is talking about material benedictions.
Correct.
So how do you find this? And then if the Bhagavatam itself is speaking like this about the material benedictions, can the devotees because there will some people who will not take to pure bhakti, but then can they be given this like they can be told in this like certainly we'll try to preach first pure bhakti only. That is our first thing. And then in course of our preaching we see that he is too much into material, but expecting material things. So and he'll not, anyways not take to pure bhakti. So can we recommend in that way that okay you decide this? So just like we see in the case in Bhagavatam so that like Diti did the tapasya, Diti was doing that Payavasan was told in that way. Can this be done for those people whom after our preaching they come to know okay they cannot take to pure bhakti directly?
Yes, so Bhagavatam is in the Bhagavatam only this is mentioned. No, Prabhupada is also quoting this. And in the purport to text 35, Prabhupada is quoting Akama Sarva Kama Va Moksha Kama Udarati. So and then he says, by reading and hearing the narration of the life and character of Prithu Maharaj, one naturally becomes a devotee. And as soon as one becomes a devotee, his material desires automatically become fulfilled. And then he's quoting the verse. So this is some substance of all Vedic literatures. The purpose of Vedic knowledge is to understand Krishna and his devotees. Whenever we speak of Krishna, we refer to his devotees also, or he's not alone. Okay, so because by practicing devotional service, so one can get all these material things also. So therefore, all these material things are also being spoken. But then the Bhagavatam is also talking about what are the results of, what is the purpose of devotional service? What are the results of material desires? What are the results of material attachments? So all that also is being spoken. So Bhagavatam is giving a complete picture. So as Srila Prabhupada says that, yes, the Bhagavatam is not one-sided. Krishna is not one-sided. So everything is being presented. So therefore, what is being presented is correct. So even a pure devotee, just like Dhruva Maharaj. So Dhruva Maharaj initially approached with material desire, then he gave up the material desire, but then still Krishna gave him everything. So one can get material things also by the practice of pure devotional service. But then that's not our goal. That's not our goal. And so therefore, the pure devotee, as we have been reading in these verses, so the pure devotee gets all the effects of karma, jnana, yoga, all effects he gets, all the benefits he gets of all these other processes. So therefore, everything is being mentioned. And the Kama Sarva Kama Moksha, this verse says that yes, even if one has material desires, then one can approach the Supreme Lord. But then, so in our preaching also, we need to present the whole picture. Okay, if you want material desires, you can pray to the Supreme Lord, you can perform devotional service to have your material desires fulfilled. But then what is the result of those material desires and material attachments? That also has to be presented. So the Bhagavatam is presenting the whole picture.
Thank you.
Correct.
Prabhuji, and the second question, like, not exactly question, but we see that this Bhavasagar is considered like ocean of that side. But and there is an analogy given of the boat, and this boat, in different places, different things are called as the boat. Like here we see that the lotus feet of the Lord is called as boat, or in the Gyan, the Bhakti Gyan is called as a boat, or the human body is called as a boat, and some different things are being called as boat, or the process of hearing and chanting is called as a boat. And sometimes in ISKCON we call it the ISKCON is like a boat. So for one analogy, like different things are called as, but although the other ocean remains the same, but the boat is different.
Yes. So what's the question?
So like,
it's just your observation, huh?
Yeah, I was just saying that.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, what is the purpose of the boat? That remains the same, right? Whether it is the human body, or whether it is the lotus feet of the Lord, ultimately, what is the purpose of the boat? The purpose of the boat is to cross the ocean. And so all these are different facilities by which one can cross the ocean.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so any other comments, questions?
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, quite often whenever some great devotee leaving this mortal world, then you find many translations come back to back, like, he amalgamated his senses into mind into intelligence, intelligence into totality of air. So what is it, and how what exactly happens?
So basically, that's what my understanding is. That's basically it is. So this is the process of Jnana and Yoga. So this is the way the Jnanis, Yogis, they become detached from the body by understanding that ultimately none of these gross and subtle elements belong to me. So he's understanding that all these elements belong to the totality of earth, water, fire, air. So they come from the Mahat Tattva. They don't belong to me. So that's how one is becoming detached. So this is by the process of Gyan. Gyan means there is deliberation. So there is deliberation on this subject matter, that how nothing is mine. All this is coming from the Mahat Tattva. And so one is sort of becoming detached from all these various gross and subtle elements. And so that is why you see it is the reverse of creation. So just like creation goes from subtle to gross. Now here you'll find it goes back from gross. So from gross to subtle, and then ultimately everything is coming from the Mahat Tattva, right? So creation begins from Mahat Tattva, then there is the creation of Ahankar. That's the first thing. Ahankar combines with the three modes, and then all these various senses and everything is created. So now the person is understanding that ultimately all of this is coming from the Mahat Tattva. So nothing belongs to me. So that is the whole process of intellectual deliberation to become detached from the gross and subtle bodies. So that is the whole process of Jnana, and even the yogis may adopt this process to become detached. But so therefore, the Jnanis and yogis are more interested in detachment. But as far as devotees are concerned, they're more interested in attachment. So the devotees, by their attachment to the Supreme Lord, then they automatically become detached from the gross and subtle. So they are not so much focused on the detachment. They're more focused on the attachment. But the Jnanis and Yogis are more focused on the detachment. Does it help?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, good. So we will conclude our discussions on Unit 18, this section on Prithu Maharaj. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for kindly attending these classes and giving us great inspiration to perform our devotional service. We are very grateful to all of you for giving your valuable association. As I already mentioned, this is the main reason why I agreed to do this teaching for this unit, because I was expecting to have the wonderful association of so many Vaishnavas. So I'm extremely grateful for all the discussions and for all the wonderful contributions which all of you have made during discussions on so many topics during the course of this Unit 18. So it has been a very wonderful experience for me personally. I don't know what has been your experience, but maybe for you it was a great austerity. But in any case, as far as I'm concerned, it was quite a blissful experience to be in your association and have wonderful discussions. So I'm extremely grateful to all of you for giving me this opportunity to render some small insignificant service. And of course, we definitely thank Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas for giving us a wonderful opportunity to practice devotional service in the association of devotees. And by doing so, we can board the boat to cross over the ocean of material existence. And we hope and pray that Krishna willing, maybe, of course, we're definitely not qualified, but we can at least hope that just like for Maharaj Prithu and Archi, the Vaikuntha airplane came. So we can hope and pray that we could also get the opportunity in the association of devotees. So thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare.
We also thank you, His Grace Vanshodhan Prabhu, for your wonderful
Hare Krishna.
presentation. You know, it was so crystal clear, absolutely no ambiguity. As if hearing from Srila Prabhupada, you are uncompromising in your presentation. I feel like the whole classroom is vibrant with purity of Srila Prabhupada's message. All the chairs, all the tables, walls, you know. Hope a person like me with some heart will also be, you know, positively influenced by this. We thank you for your punctuality, for your coverage. And I gave some feedback to Prabhu also. He only very humbly asked me in the first or second presentation only. So I said, if you could reduce speed little bit, you know, because we are not so fast. So then he reduced also his speed of speech. So we are very grateful and we want your association more and more. We did not feel as if you were so far in Kanpur because you were so purely speaking. So it was not like some separation. We were with you only. So we want to have your physical association also very soon. And thank you very much for giving this complete presentation before time, and completely everything is covered.
So Sundarsham Bro, I'm personally extremely grateful to you for personally being present in these classes and inspiring me so much by your wonderful association and presence. Thank you very much for being a source of inspiration to all of us by your sincerity and dedication and being present.
You are the presenter of these sessions.
So
please thank you for giving nice commentaries of the acharyas and touching upon those vital, basic and very primary as well as very important essential truths of our Krishna conscious practical life practices, truths. So very grateful to you, Vanshodhan Prabhu. So let us thank Vanshodhan Prabhu by once chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. His Grace Swam Shivadan Prabhu ki. Srila
Srila
Prabhupada
Prabhupada
ki.
ki jai. Thank you very much for your encouraging words, and we hope to have your association again in the near future. Hare Krishna.